I'm going to flip this engine over so that I can get to the oil pan to disconnect the connecting rods. And there goes some more fluid dumping out of there. What was that? I have to find out. Either I'm getting stronger or this engine is getting lighter, because that was the easiest it was to turn it over. Now, this oil pan has been off before. I just put it back on with a few bolts. So that'll be easy to take off. So even with the power tool, I still like the long extension. Makes it easier to get down in there. Don't have to fight. I better get that seated in there better. See what's happening. It's falling off because of the weight. Not all the way off, but most of the way. There's the oil pan. Looks like a lot of RTV compound on there, so somebody must have had an oil leak and just put the pan on with RTV. Unless somebody built this engine and put it on after that. I'm going to take the oil pump off first. There appears to be 1 5/8 inch bolt holding it on. And there are 2 alignment pins. Those 2 holes, the small ones on the ends, align it, and then the pump rod goes in there like that. Turns when the cam turns. Yeah, I don't know when this happened, but the sleeve that holds that aligned is actually cracked. You can see a chunk of it out there. So I don't know when that happened, but could be that we were going to have an oil pump failure. Anyways, find a place to put that. I'm going to put a new oil pump in because I'm going through all this trouble. I want it to be good. So I'm looking at the crankshaft the way it is now, and without turning it over, I can get at, this ends up being the number 8 because this is the passenger side of the engine. So 8 and 6 probably can be taken out with where it sits right now, as well as number 3. And then I will rotate the crankshaft to where I can get to the nuts that hold the bearing caps on some other cylinders. Okay, that's took some beating on that with the impact wrench. Maybe I'm going to need a heavier duty one. Actually, it turns out that if you put it on the 3rd setting, it actually works better. So I've made myself a place to lay them out in order, just in case. I've been finding everything that with this engine has seemed pretty good. Maybe once I get the block prepped and everything, all I'll need is just some rings and bearings. But you don't know that till you get it all apart. That cap doesn't want to come off. So we're going to get a brass drift, and there is a little flange here. Just tap on it very gently because we don't want to break anything or mar anything, but I'll see if we can get it off that way. Actually, as I was getting the stuff to use the brass drift, I decided maybe the dead blow hammer is all I need. And I've just dropped the nut down into the engine. Let's try it with the drift. More direct. So it's starting to come. See if I can find the bolts on the piston. Down a little bit. It is coming a little. Maybe I can pry it up with a screwdriver now. Problem is you can't get underneath the other side of it. Can't quite get there. I just noticed that number 7 is also where I can get to the bolts. I'm going to try to take that off, or the nuts. I'll try to take that off first. See if that gives me any extra room. And I dropped another bolt, another nut. Get my magnet and retrieve that. There we are, and if I can see the other one I dropped, maybe I can retrieve that too. Got it. I'm going to put these nuts up where number 7 is going to be on my layout board and see if I can get this cap off. Get at it from the one side. Maybe the trick is to turn the crankshaft a little bit so I can get at it from the other side. These things are tough. those two nuts before I drop them again. See if I can put some pressure on one side and tap the other side. When I've disassembled engines before, this wasn't that difficult. It pretty much came right off. Okay, that did it. Okay, I'm going to go put that with the number 8 in my layout and see if I can push that piston out. Not anywhere near coming out yet. I think I'm going to get a piece of wood so that it doesn't damage the inside of the piston, and insert it in there and try to push with that, so I'm pushing on the piston instead of on the bolts on the connecting rod, because I can't get much force generated against those. I can get a little bit, but my bearing just spun around to the bottom. So there's the first bearing. That's oil on there. It actually looks like it's in really good shape. Well, now that I rubbed some of the grease off of it, I can see that there's a little bit of scratching on it. I mean, it's not like it's ready to fail, but I am not going to put these back in for certain. Okay, so I found a piece of plastic conduit. I'm going to try to push on the inside of the piston with that. See if, because that won't damage anything. Okay, I've got it down to about where the wear ring, the lip on the top of the cylinder wall, is preventing it from coming out. So that's where you need to kind of drive it out. It's starting to come. Now the problem I'm having is the connecting rod's actually in my way. But I've got about, well, the top ring is out of the block, so it's probably hung up on the second one. I'm going to need something thinner to get down alongside that connecting rod to drive it out. So I'm probably not going to record all this, but what I'm going to attempt to do is to get the number 7 cylinder out of my way so that I can put that plastic pipe down there and reach it. Right now it's not able to reach it, so it's going to be the same process. I'm going to gently pry and tap on the nuts that hold or the studs that hold the piston on. I said gently. Until I can get that off, and then same thing, I'll try to drive that out of the cylinder. Last one I did with a brass drift because it gets you a better, more solid hit on the stud. And there it started to come. There we go. Same thing for that bearing. It looks like it's got a little bit of wear. So those aren't very deep. They're mostly stained, if you will, rather than scored, but it's not something I'd put back in the engine. I'll put that up with my number 7 set there and try to drive that one down in the cylinder. That was pretty easy to get it down to there. I can feel it starting to come out. I should shorten this. Two rings are out on this side, so I'm going to hold the piston and continue to tap it. There we go. And there is a cylinder. Let me see if I can. I'm sorry, a piston with the connecting rod. Wow, those are pretty tight in there. I would have expected that to turn a little bit easier. But that is the number 7 cylinder. I guess maybe when I take the block in, I'll maybe take these in and get a professional builder's opinion onto whether the connecting rods and pistons are salvageable, and maybe just get new rings, because I don't know what these are, but his opinion would be valued, that's for certain. So now that I got my number 7 piston out of the way, the connecting rod actually, I should have plenty of room to get this plastic rod in there to knock number 8 out. And then, once you've seen how I'm doing that, it'll be just the same process for the rest of the pistons. I really should cut this piece of pipe down, but I guess I will do that for the remainder. But for now, I'm just going to work with it till the end of this video, and then I will go, not the end of the video I guess, but when I'm done with this piston, and I will go cut it down and make it easier to reach the rest of them, but it's obviously a good plan for how to get them out. So, other than having some carbon on the top, they really don't look like they're in bad shape. This one moves a little easier than the other one did. That's what I would have expected. I think that other one's a bit tight, but I will get a professional engine builder's opinion on this. See what he thinks is the best way to go to get my results I want, and not kill the budget unnecessarily. I mean, it's fine if I need to replace a whole rotating assembly, but if these, and maybe he can even identify what kind of pistons they are, I really don't know. I will look for some. Well, this is stamped, I thought it said GM, but maybe not. I don't know what it is, so we'll get the rest of them out, and then I'll be back for the camshaft removal. Maybe I found a little easier way to take these out. I just started by taking the nuts off the caps and just started pounding on the inside of the piston, and it moved. I've got a good separation here. I don't know if that's going to come the rest of the way, but it is. So that was a lot quicker than trying to just take the cap off first, and I've got the piston, partially at least, pushed down through the cylinder. I can feel at least one of the rings is out. progress has been stymied a bit. That's coming. And now I've got my rod stuck in there. Okay, I'm going to have to get something that I can grip that with and pull it out. So a pair of needle nose pliers pulled it out easily. I just couldn't get a grip on it because of my grease on my gloves. So that is almost out. And there it is. Be careful, they can sometimes pop out pretty suddenly. So okay, that's that. I will continue with the rest of the pistons. So I learned another thing here, I believe. I was trying to find out this number 3 piston, and I think what was happening is the place where the bolt goes through the connecting rod was hitting on the side of the block right here, and I couldn't get it to come out. So I've rotated the crank a bit, so I think it will clear. And I think it needs to rotate just a little bit more now that I got it closer down there. Rotating it now. I think I need to pop it back up, and I can use the handle of the hammer. Might be in a pickle here now. Well, not too much of a pickle. I just might need to go get a ring compressor to be able to punch that back up in. Or take the ring off. That's a possibility too. I'll try that first. I'll just get a screwdriver behind it and try to pry it off. So the ring came off very easily. I've been going all about 10 seconds. Now I should be able to punch the piston back up and rotate the crank more. Seems like something's binding back here. There it is. Bolt on the not the flywheel, it's the flex plate on an automatic transmission. And since I'm going to have to turn this more, I'm going to take all three of these bolts that I had stowed in there so that I knew they bolted the transmission bell housing on. Now that turns freely, and I should be able to punch that pistonette fairly easily. But the lesson there is don't or make sure that when you're doing this, you're not having interference between this part of your, make sure that's in the frame. This part was hitting on the side of the block, so you got to make sure that you got clearance to pound that all the way out. And again, I took the ring out, and there is a top and bottom to the rings, I believe. I know there's a top on some of them. Don't know whether it's on the top one or not. Just a tiny bit of a bevel that goes one direction. It doesn't matter on this because I'm not putting the same rings back in. So I'll just pop this onto the piston and proceed to remove the rest of them. Might need a little more help than what I can do with holding it. I might have to put it in a vise to get that ring back on. Try. It came off easy. If you put one end in first and then work it around, goes all the way. Okay, so that is the number 3 piston and a lesson learned. Okay, all the pistons are out. A couple lessons that we learned there, one of which is, I've mentioned them along the way, you know, be careful you're not going to run into the block with the connecting rod. It probably is a little bit easier if you can get the crank up at the top. If you can turn your crank easily. So that's worth thinking about. Now, I decided that I don't want to have to, as I'm lifting the crankshaft out, I don't want to have to deal with that flex plate. I probably can't get it off while I'm on the stand here, but I tried, because of clearance issues, I tried a deep well socket, and I couldn't get it to get a flush connection to the nut or the bolt head. And so then I tried a 1/2 inch universal. I got it on the nut, but the angle of the universal made it a little difficult to deal with. So what I ended up doing is I got a 3/8 shallow socket with an extension. The shallow socket allows me to get a good fit on the nut. The extension allows the part that needs to clear this engine stand to clear the shaft with a extension, whereas with the deep well socket it wouldn't do it. So now I can get my gun on there, and hopefully this is powerful enough to take it off. I tried it with a manual wrench, and that didn't work so well. So I had this jammed in, the wooden part of the handle jammed in one of the crank journals so that the crank wouldn't turn as I was cranking on it, but that's not necessary with the impact wrench. So now I can just, once I got a wrench combination socket and that actually worked better, it became pretty easy to do. Not going to be able to get this flex plate out of here because of clearance issues, I don't believe, but I won't have to lift it with the crankshaft. And I damaged a couple of the teeth a little bit when I was trying to do the compression test because the bolts were hitting on this engine stand. So I'm going to replace it. I don't want to put it back in and find out that a ways down the road I've got issues that are preventing me from I might have to lift this out anyway with it cranked, but or maybe when I get a little more leeway on the crank it'll just fall off. Won't fall very far because of the construction of the engine stand, but nice to know what's going to happen with it. It won't go crash into the floor. A little bit of prying between the back of the crankshaft and the flex plate, and it is now disengaged from the crankshaft, so when I lift the crankshaft up, that will sit there because it's resting on the two arms of the engine stand, and the block will prevent it from falling forward. So the next thing I'm up to is taking off taking off the bearing caps. Those should come off relatively easily. Gonna loosen. two more here at the back where the oil pump was attached. Okay, they're all loose. I do have to go to the other side now, take off the timing chain because that's going to prevent me from lifting the crank. So I had just put this damper on here for ease in turning the crankshaft because it gave me something to hold on to. And I had taken the timing cover off before, and I just have a couple of 7/16 bolts holding it on. Actually, one. Thought I had seen two there. So now, timing chain. There are, looks like, well, the engine's upside down now, so this is the camshaft here. This is the crankshaft. There are, appears to be 3 bolts holding the camshaft on, and I think they're 1/2 inch. I don't know if I happen to have that socket right here. It's a 7/16. I gotta go find that socket. Son of a gun if that socket wasn't right where I put it. So these 3 hold the timing chain sprocket onto the camshaft. Once those are out, timing chain slips off, and I guess this one's not going to slip off so easy. It is a separate piece. It's held on with a, oh, I forget what they're called now. It's held on with a, I'll call it a pin. I know that's not the name of it. That it slides through that groove. So I should be able to take the bearing caps off now, and I'm going to take them off. And again, even though I'm not going to use the bearings, I'm going to put the caps in order in my layout where I have the pistons are. So that's the front of the engine. I'll put that in front of the number 1 cylinder. So this is for 1 and 2. Then another cap, 3 and 4. So I'll put that after 2, so on and so forth till I have them all off. So I remembered the name of this. It's called a key. These, I believe, are half moon keys. Not quite a half, but they're the channel that they go in is rounded at the bottom, and they are rounded to fit into it. So this is the rear main cap, and this is where the oil pump was connected. And something I found interesting, that I have torn apart a 78 Blazer, so it was a 350 Chevy engine. But this thing has a hole there right where the oil pump is. And if you look at the crankshaft, there's a hole, and it appears as though oil gets pumped all through that crankshaft. And if I can zoom in on it here. You notice there are holes beside each where the rod bearings sit. And I'm going to turn this over a little bit here because I think there's one right on the end here. That'll make a liar out of me. Yeah, there is. Right there, you can see it. So apparently, oil gets pumped directly into there and goes right down this crankshaft and pumps oil directly into the underside of the rod bearings and the main bearings. So, so I am certain that when I tore apart the 78 Blazer, which was a 350, as I said, it did not have those holes. So I don't know how it lubricated those bearings. Maybe it just from sitting in the hitting the oil in the pan as it rotated. Maybe that's all it took. But this appears to have been done a much better way, I guess. Next thing is to just lift that crankshaft out of there and find a place to set it. Took a little bit of wiggling to get the crankshaft out because of the piece on the back. This, let's see if you can get a better look at it. This piece fits into a slot down there, and it's fairly tight, so you have to lift it out pretty much vertically. But I was able to do it. So the crankshaft is now out of the engine. I just got to go put it on the shelf. Would have been easier if the flex plate was off. So if you're going to tackle a project like this, do yourself a favor, and while you have the engine up on the hoist up in the air before you put it on the motor or the engine stand, just go ahead and take that off. It'll save you some trouble in the long run. So what's left now is the camshaft. See if I can back this off, give myself a little bit of room and give you a little bit of a view. It just slips out easily. You have to take it out pretty much level, because the lobes, if you don't take it out level, will hit. There it is. This is the gear that turns the distributor. See if I can see any markings on here. There are some there on the back end. We'll see if I can look up what this is. I couldn't see any markings on the front, but if I can, down here, this is a lobe that runs the shaft for the fuel pump if you have a mechanical fuel pump. So This cam doesn't look too bad. I'll measure it a bit and see if I can determine what the lift at least was on these. And let you know if I can't look it up by some of these numbers here. It is stamped crane, so the sticker under my hood was accurate. Fireball 296A is what it says. It's kind of hard to read, but right there, Fireball 296A. They could be nice and stamp that on the other end, so that if you're trying to figure out what you have in an engine that you didn't put together, you might be able to figure it out. And on the bottom, it's, I believe, 080. So that engine block is pretty much bare now and ready to send off to get it cleaned and any machine work that needs to be done on it. So that'll be happening in about a month. I called the gentleman this morning and he said that he couldn't do it for about a month because he was full. He didn't even have a place to put it. So that's gonna be it, I think. I'll flip this thing over and look at it a little bit, but I think I'm pretty much done with this video because I do have to take these bearings out of here or they'll fall whenever I flip it over. But other than looking at the cylinders, which I doubt I can show very well on a video, there's not much left to do here. Only thing I see is 2 bolts to take out the oil filter mount. Don't know whether he's going to want that out for when I take it in or not. But basically it looks like it's in pretty good shape to me. I think it is definitely rebuildable. Thanks for watching. So there are holes in the main bearings and slots that allow oil to circulate, and then on the block there's a hole here as well. I don't know if that's a return or whether that's how it gets its oil, but it's part of the oiling system.